Well, all right, everybody. Welcome to our first chapter that we cover, our first system that we cover in Biology 202, A&P II. It's the endocrine system. And what I like to do here with these videos is pretty much I'll show you the textbook, point out the high points, the things that I tend to focus on, things that I think are going to be important for you. Working out of this copy, this edition of the text, is the Holes, Human Anatomy and Physiology. This is the 16th edition. We've been using this text through various editions dating back to the 1990s. So, a few things will change from one edition to the next, but not really all that much. Let's see. I need to move some things around here to make a little more room. Pause while I do that. So, one of the first things in each chapter of this text is this little section called Understanding Words. And right here, I realize I'm going to try zoom in on this and adjust the lighting a little bit. Let's see if we can get that to be a little clearer. I think that may be better. Of course, you should be able to see this in your own copy of the text. And hopefully, most of you have the e-book that came along with your access to Connect. Anyway, I like to run through these. A lot of these roots and prefixes of words come from Latin. Some come from Greek. And as you learn these, you'll find that you'll meet new words down the road, and you'll be able to use this little bit of knowledge to kind of figure new words out. So the first one here is quart, referring to bark or rind. For example, we're going to talk about the adrenal cortex. And like the bark on a tree or the rind of a melon, it's the outer portion of the adrenal gland. Probably going to see adrenal here pretty soon anyway. I don't see it as I look across the list here. Renal, I think you might be familiar with. Renal refers to kidneys. And the prefix ad means upon. So the adrenal glands sit upon your kidneys. I believe we will see that in another place here. All right, so anyway, crine, to secrete, and this chapter is devoted to the endocrine system. And the endo prefix means within, so it produces internal secretions. We will contrast that here shortly with exocrine. You should be familiar with a few exocrine glands already from A&P I, things like sweat glands and tear glands. So we'll see that distinction. Diure is to pass urine. So a diuretic, you may already be familiar, is a substance that will promote urine production. Endo, we've already talked about up here with the endocrine system. It means inside as opposed to exo. So endocrine glands internally secrete into a body fluid. Quite often that body fluid is blood. Exo is the outside, so exocrine glands secrete to the outside of the gland through a duct, like the tear duct. The tear is produced inside the gland, it flows through a duct, to the surface of the eye. Horm is an impetus or an impulse. So hormones are substances that cells secrete that affect another cell. Sometimes they affect themselves, but those, by some strict definitions, are not technically hormones. I don't know how loud that train is coming through in the video. I hope not too bad. Hyper and hypo, I would think you would already be familiar with these. Hyper means above or extra. We talk about a child possibly being hyperactive. Here we see as the example from this chapter, hyperthyroidism. It's where the thyroid gland is overactive. Hypo being the opposite, meaning below, beneath, less. So hypothyroidism is a below normal secretion of thyroid hormones. Lact refers to milk. Of course, lactose is milk sugar. Prolactin is a hormone that promotes or leads to production of milk. Med, some cases pronounced mead, like the median on the highway. It means the middle. The adrenal medulla is in the middle, the inside part of the adrenal glands. We contrast that with the adrenal cortex that we saw as the first of these words. Para means beside. The parathyroid glands are alongside the thyroid gland, which the thyroid gland is in your neck, sitting on top of the thyroid cartilage, which you should have seen in the respiratory system chapter in A&P I. TOC refers to birth. And I'll move this over a little bit here. So we're going to learn about a hormone called oxytocin that stimulates uterine muscles to contract during childbirth. That's not the only thing oxytocin does, but that's where it gets its name. Tropic is influencing. So here's a mouthful. Adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is a hormone that comes from the anterior pituitary gland and stimulates the adrenal cortex. So adrenocorticotropic, adrenal cortex influencing. So as I was saying, as you pick up these little bits and pieces, then when you're introduced to larger, longer words, you can kind of pick them apart and figure out what they mean. Lastly here for this chapter, VAS, VAS or VAS, refers to blood vessels. Vasopressin is a hormone that helps to maintain blood pressure by constricting blood vessels. All right, let's see how long I've been talking here. We've got a little bit over 8 minutes in, so I will continue on for now. Try not to get these videos to be too terribly long. So the endocrine system, regulating functions of the human body to maintain homeostasis, is an enormous job. It's achieved by partnering of the nervous system and the endocrine system. Again, that glare is not very good, is it? Let's try something here. It's not good enough. Okay. I guess that's the downfall of this technique. I could, and maybe I will try it in the next video, pull the book up on the screen and then just use the cursor to point at it. So the endocrine system. So what they're saying here still bothers me that the light is causing such a glare. That's a little bit better. Is that one part of the body can communicate with another part by a couple of different ways. One is the nervous system. So, for example, your brain communicates with your skeletal muscles by way of nerves, motor neurons, so that the brain can control muscle movements. And those are really rapid means of communication. I almost like to think of nerves connecting the central nervous system to effectors like muscles as almost like a telephone call running through a wire. On the other hand, glands can communicate with other parts of the body, referred to as their target organs or target cells, by a slightly slower method, and that's where the endocrine system comes in. So these endocrine glands secrete chemical substances called hormones that are generally carried through the body by means of the bloodstream. And they eventually reach the organ that they are sending a message to and trigger a response. That would be analogous, would be more like mailing somewhat something, or a little bit more modern thought of it, rather than calling someone, sending them an email. All right, so endocrine glands I've already mentioned. Get this positioned a little differently here. So endocrine glands secrete chemical substances called hormones into the internal environment. Those sometimes just get into interstitial fluid, but most of the time they get into the bloodstream. Hormones diffuse from the interstitial fluid into the bloodstream, where they act on target cells that can be some distance away. Other times they're very close, but we'll make those distinctions as we go through those different glands. And down here, in contrast to endocrine secretions, exocrine glands secrete chemical substances that enter tubes or ducts that lead to body surfaces. Now, those aren't always external surfaces, which can be a little bit confusing sometimes when they use that terminology. But the secretions of exocrine glands are carried generally through tubes or ducts to where they're needed. Then up here we see talk about paracrine and autocrine secretions. And this draws a little bit of a distinction between endocrine. Technically, you could argue that these are endocrine secretions, but they're more specific to the way they reach their target cells. So you notice that paracrine secretions enter the interstitial fluid and affect only the nearby cells. So in other words, they don't reach the bloodstream and get carried off to another part of the body far away. And then autocrine secretions affect the cell that secreted the substance. So going back to those word roots, auto means self. So autocrine means that the cell communicates with itself. It triggers itself to do something. And I think last thing here we'll talk about in this video is this overview of the endocrine glands that we're going to be talking about. We have the hypothalamus, which you might recall from chapter 11 is part of the brain. Hanging from the hypothalamus is the pituitary gland, which sits, as a reminder, it sits in a bony structure called the sella turcica, which is part of the sphenoid bone. And then we have I was taught to pronounce this pineal gland because of its resemblance to a pine cone. Some people call it the pineal gland, and I think if you're on the ebook and click on this word, you can get it to pronounce it, and I think it will pronounce it pineal. So I could be wrong, but pineal is the way I have always pronounced it. Now down here in the base of the neck, you'll find your thyroid gland. And behind the thyroid gland, sandwiched in between it and the thyroid cartilage, are the parathyroid glands. Typically, there are 4 of these, and they're all just alike, 2 on each side. In the center of the chest, here's another one of those words, that central cavity in the chest, I was taught to pronounce it the mediastinum. I hear a lot of colleagues call it mediastinum, and the textbook will tell you to pronounce it mediastinum. I'm going to stick with mediastinum. I think saying mediastinum is like saying speedometer or thermometer, which we normally pronounce speedometer or thermometer. So I'll go with mediastinum. Anyway, the thymus is located there in the mediastinum. As I mentioned earlier, the adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys. Here's the pancreas. It's right behind your stomach. And it is interesting in that it is both endocrine and exocrine. And then females have ovaries and males have testes. So we don't focus too much in this chapter on the structure or the hormones of the gonads, which are either ovaries or testes. Those are saved for the chapter on the reproductive system, but we'll see a little bit about them here in chapter 13. All right, looking at about 17 minutes here to get this part done, which is probably longer than you wanted to listen. Sorry, I do tend to ramble, but I'm going to end this video right here, and we'll pick up with the next one.